Some encounters can't be explained, and tonight you'll hear them all. Story 1. I was a security guard for a children's hospital. I worked night shifts, 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. The hospital is pretty big, with a lot of ground to cover, and we begin our shifts with duties divided up. I volunteered for lockups, which is when you ensure every door in the hospital is locked up tight for the night. There was one area where cleaning staff didn't leave until 0000 HRs, and that was the clinic. It's 5 floors, and everything above the first is haunted. You'd think the morgue or other wings would house the spirits of children long gone, but nope. I've talked to the cleaning crews who were more than happy to leave when the time came because they've heard and seen things in that clinic. And so have I. My duties were to ensure all lights were off save for the lobby floor and all doors were secured until morning unlock. I'd sweep each floor, 10 minutes probably, double-checking lights and locks. There, I'd hear distant footsteps, doors opening, lights I know I turned off suddenly on. I worked there for 3 months and came to expect it at that point. One night really freaked me out. I was finishing my rounds on the top floor, the last stop before I left the clinic, and my blood froze as I heard giggling from one of the examination rooms. Light poured through the bottom crack of the door, a light I know for sure I clicked off. I shook my head and made my way to the elevator. I wasn't about to deal with that. I'd wait till daybreak started around 5 a.m. to deal with that. Hope you enjoyed the story. Story 2. Can some non-believers try to debunk this for me? So I've been staying at my grandma's house for the summer and I've got a few ghost stories that I would love debunked. So starting off with one that's been confusing me a bunch. Like a month ago I was sleeping and I had some stupid dream about going ghost hunting. I got locked in a bathroom and all the lights got turned off. Then a small black hand came out of the wall to my right and grabbed my hand. Then I woke up and I was still holding this little hand. For a few seconds I'm laying there holding this little hand, too scared to look over. I end up letting it go. You could say, maybe it was something next to you that you were holding. I was sleeping next to the wall. So in my dream, the wall that the little hand came out of was the wall that I was sleeping next to. Next one is less scary and someone could easily debunk this one. A few days later after that first one, I wake up and start looking around. I see something near the edge of the air mattress I'm sleeping on. It looks like a little blonde boy hunched over. I look away and look back. Gone. There is a chair over there and a few things that could have made it look like a person, but not how it was. Anyways, hopefully someone can try to debunk this for me, because I'm still sleeping on the floor in here every morning. By the way, I think there are 3 ghosts here. A little blonde boy who mainly likes to comfort people, some tall man who loves in the basement but is also like the protector of the house, and then my mom suggested that an older relative, I think grandma's great-grandma, since there's a portrait of her in this house somewhere. Story 3. Something strange happened in my office at night. I want to share a strange experience that happened in my office. My friend Ayush often stays overnight in the office to finish his work. One morning while we were having tea, he told me that when he works late, he hears weird noises, like benches being moved, people whispering and objects falling. Our office is in a 4-floor building and we occupy the 1st and 3rd floors. A few days later, I also stayed late with him. Around 1 a.m., Ayush remembered he had forgotten to lock the 3rd floor office. I told him I'd go up and lock it. When I reached the 3rd floor, the whole place was dark. No lights, just heavy rain and thunder outside. I switched on my phone flashlight and walked in. The AC was still running, so I switched it off. That's when I saw something near the computer desk. It looked like a figure, a head moving slightly. My heart skipped a beat. At first, I thought it was a helmet left behind, but something about it didn't feel right. With fear building inside me, I quickly locked the office and went downstairs. The next morning, when I opened the 3rd floor office again, the helmet wasn't there. Nothing was on that desk. And here's the strangest part. There's only one spare key and it was with me. I still don't know what I saw that night. Story 4. A terrifying experience that seems too much of a coincidence. This is a story a female friend of mine told me a few years ago. An eerie event that happened purely by coincidence. I'll write it down here in the first person, just as she told it. When I was still a 16-year-old high school student, everything began when my then-boyfriend, Jacob, a pseudonym, cheated on me. He was the first man I had ever seriously dated, so when I found out about his infidelity, I felt as if my world had completely ended, falling into utter despair. That intense grief eventually turned into resentment, and wanting to teach him a lesson, I searched online for ways to curse someone. Of course, I never seriously thought about cursing him to death, but I did wonder if maybe a little misfortune might happen to him. As I looked through the sites, out of the countless how to curse someone pages that came up, I chose one that looked like it might work and carried out its instructions. I won't go into the detailed method here, but the item I used for the curse was a bright red envelope containing a piece of paper with an incantation written on it. Following the steps written in the online article, I kept that cursed envelope with me at all times. But as time went by, nothing happened. He didn't get sick, nor did he suffer any accident. I was deeply disappointed. After all, it was just one of those groundless ways to curse someone found online. There's no way it would work, I thought. Although the gloom in my heart lingered, as time passed, the burning resentment I once had began to fade. Gradually, it all started to feel foolish, and eventually, the cursed envelope was tossed into my desk drawer and completely forgotten. About 10 years later, one day, by then, I had graduated from college and was in my 4th year as a working adult, finally deciding to leave my parents' home and live on my own. While sorting through and packing my things for the move, I found, tucked deep inside my desk drawer, that bright red envelope. It was the cursed envelope I had made back then. Wow, I can't believe I actually made this. I'd completely forgotten how nostalgic. While reminiscing, I thought about throwing it away, but given what it was, I couldn't bring myself to just toss it in the trash. Instead, I burned it in the kitchen. At that moment, I muttered to myself, "Jacob, I'll forgive you now. This way the curse will be lifted." As I poked at the cursed envelope with my fingertip, watching it burn down to ashes, it felt as if a bittersweet page of my youth had finally been turned, leaving me oddly refreshed. Day, the friend who came to help me move was Sophia, a pseudonym, a high school friend who had a driver's license. Since it was my very first time living alone, I didn't have too many belongings, so we rented a U-Haul truck, loaded everything up in about an hour, and moved them. Then, in the still bare and empty new apartment, the two of us began unpacking. Since I'm the type of person who can't live without TV or internet, I had asked Sophia to help me with the move because she was good at setting up electronics. She quickly connected all the cables, and before long, the internet and TV were ready to use. "Sophia, you're amazing, thanks," I said. The very first thing that appeared on the TV screen was the evening news. While unpacking and listening absent-mindedly, I could swear I heard the announcer say the name of my hometown. "Hey, Sophia, didn't he just say in a town in Texas, my hometown?" The two of us turned to the TV screen and saw an apartment in a familiar neighborhood engulfed in flames, sending up towering pillars of fire. At that moment, when the news introduced the sole victim of the blaze, we both cried out in unison, "Ah!" At the bottom of the screen, white letters displayed, "Victim, Jacob Miller, 27, local resident," while the announcer's calm voice steadily read out his name and age. What appeared was Jacob, the very same Jacob I had dated back in high school, his name and the familiar face I remembered. Could it be because I burned the cursed envelope in the kitchen? Had I, while thinking I had forgiven him, actually cursed my ex-boyfriend to death? Even now, that thought weighs heavily on my heart. I truly shuddered when I heard this story from my friend. Perhaps it was all coincidence, but for my ex to perish in flames the very next day after I burned the cursed envelope, can it really be dismissed as mere coincidence? Story 5. The Swimmer in the Locked Hotel Pool. I'm currently in Mackinac City, staying at the Clarion Hotel, a place I've visited with my family for years. Normally, the pool and jacuzzi hours are vague. The signs say they close at 10 p.m., but I've been in there at 3 a.m. or even 8 a.m. in the past without issue. So have many other visitors I've spoken to over the years. It's always been open. I have also spoken to some guests in the past who claimed it closed at 11 p.m. or midnight. The website and relative information about these things are often outdated. Tonight was different. Every double door leading into the pool area was locked at around 3 p.m. 3 separate entrances, dead bolted. Even the arcade room, which used to be packed with games, was now completely empty, just a hollow vacant space. No machines, no lights. It looked abandoned, like it hadn't been touched in years. The only way in was through this strange sliding window-looking door, while the main sliding door beside it was jammed shut. I got inside and slipped into the jacuzzi, alone. My family was asleep upstairs. The jacuzzi is in its own room separate from the pool, so with the jets on you can't hear much. TBH. I don't know why me or anyone else here never asked the main desk to address such an inconvenience. Perhaps I will tomorrow if the problem remains. Anyways, I'm all alone in this large indoor pool slash arcade slash jacuzzi slash washing room area. It's split up into 4 quadrants, and each one is surrounded by walls. You cannot see the other room or enter it without entering a specific door. The pool and jacuzzi area both lead to same general area though, but it's still true that you cannot see either room when in there, even though they're literally in the same exact room and not split by more doors. So I'm chilling there, relaxing. When the jets timed out and shut off, the silence hit me, followed immediately by the sound of a door opening. I was like, WTH? They fixed it? Or, another guest who knew to enter from that slide window wanted a night swim slash jacuzzi? I shrugged it off. Then, splash! Someone had jumped into the pool. It wasn't frightening at first. In fact, I felt pretty comfortable. Knowing someone else here loved swimming or hot tubbing as much as me, it didn't matter the time. Then came the unmistakable rhythm of swimming. Again, totally normal. Strong strokes cutting through the water, lap after lap. Whoever it was, they weren't playing around. They were swimming hard, like they were training. At first, I was almost relieved. I thought, okay, at least I'm not the only one sneaking in here after hours. But about 15 to 20 seconds later, I had to get up to restart the jacuzzi jets. That meant walking past the pool, and when I did, my stomach dropped. The pool was empty, perfectly still, not a ripple. There were no wet footprints, no signs anyone had ever been in the water. Just the heavy silence of a locked room that shouldn't have had anyone in it but me. I slammed the button for the jacuzzi, hurried back into the hot water, and sat there frozen, trying to rationalize what I had just heard. But I know I heard it. The splash was too clear, the strokes too distinct. It wasn't imagination. The strangest part, this hotel is supposedly booked solid right now. The parking lot is full, families arriving late into the night, yet in that moment it felt like I was the only living person in that entire pool area. I'm still sitting here as I type this, and I can't shake the thought. If no one was swimming, then who or what was making those splashes? Has anyone else ever experienced a hotel pool haunting? I've had other paranormal encounters. I also had a list once about where I work too. I'm no stranger to these things, and unlike most, I actually absorb and accept that whatever it was is beyond this realm's understanding. It's better than lying to myself, especially when it's this undeniable. Story 6. Something visited my house while my dad was on his deathbed. I've been a paranormal skeptic my entire life, but this is the one experience I've had that I cannot explain with my usual rationale. This occurred 4 days before my dad died. To set the scene, there were 5 people in the house. My dad, who was comatose and near death at this point, and my mom, who have a bedroom upstairs, and then me, my brother, and my granddad, who all have bedrooms downstairs. That night, I was up late in my bedroom, and around 2 a.m., I hear the very distinct sound of human footsteps in the hallway outside my room, followed by the hallway light clicking on and off. I clearly heard the click of the light switch and saw the light from under my door. I assumed it was my brother, but a few moments later he knocked on my door and asked, "Were you in the hallway just now?" I replied, "No, that wasn't me. I thought it was you." Well, if it wasn't either of us, who the hell was it? The only other people in the house it could have been were my mom and my granddad. If it was my mom, she would have had to descend an extremely creaky staircase to get into the hallway, and we would have heard that from our bedrooms. And the sound of the footsteps did not match my granddad, who drags his feet on the ground and walks with a cane. Confused, I stepped out of my bedroom and went to my granddad's door. I could hear his loud snoring from inside, confirming it was definitely not him. Then I went upstairs and peeked into my parents' room. My mom was fast asleep snoring as well. Thoroughly freaked out, I checked every other room in the house and verified that all doors and windows were locked, ruling out the possibility of a random intruder. By this point, my brother was nearly in tears because he was so scared. Neither of us were in a joking mood considering the family tragedy we were experiencing, so I know he wasn't pulling my leg. The next day, I asked my mom if she was up walking in the hallway at 2 a.m., and she confirmed that she was asleep and hadn't left her room at all that night. It freaks me out so bad because it's an event that has 2 witnesses, me and my brother, and we both heard/saw the exact same thing. We were up for nearly 2 hours afterwards, scared as fuck, trying to come up with some rational explanation, but we have none. Maybe it was an angel of death, maybe it was a dead relative visiting my dad, maybe it was a fucking demon because the vibes in the house were so depressing at that point. I have no clue. But that's the one, and hopefully only, paranormal experience I've ever had. If anybody has ideas about what it could have been, please let me know. Story 7. Black Blob Through the Phone. Hey everyone. I've never really posted in here before, but I wanted to share something with you that happened to me. It was early in the morning, and I had just woke up. I did my regular thing and picked up my phone to go and check my stuff. Before I could do that, I seen a reflection through my phone from my TV of a big black blob that was supposed to be a face. My TV was paused, and it was paused with a woman on the TV. I turned around to physically look at my TV, and the face was there. I look back in the reflection of my phone, and I see a big black blob covering the face. I checked the reflection 3 or 4 times, and it appeared through my phone, but not with my own physical eyes. So I was wondering if it's possible for spirits to show up through a reflection of a phone in that way. It wasn't that I was half asleep, because I got up and checked the TV and my phone back and forth, so please help me in knowing what's going on. Story 8. Demon? Skinwalker? Anyone have experiences like mine? I would like to make my story known to others that have maybe experienced what I have, or if you haven't, don't take this with a grain of salt. Now, I have been a long-time avid outdoorsman. I live in Michigan and love hunting. Also backpacking, I've only had 2 experiences like this. The one I'm about to describe is the worst of the 2. This happened in 2019. I was at a buddy's house whose whole family lives on one street. All the houses are on one side and everything is woods. Anywhere you go, my friend's house is at the end farther down the road. So with that being said, nobody that isn't his family will be outside, especially late at night. We were having a fire, it was maybe 1 a.m.-ish, and my friend asked me if I heard people talking. He turned off the music, and we sat there silent. We listened, then we heard very strange laughing, but only one thing, not multiple. Then the laughing morphed into 3 things. I would say it started talking. It was so weird hearing it. Now where we heard this was across this little stream, so we would hear if it was coming to us. My friend has bad vision, so this next part. One only saw there was no cloud cover that night. The moonlight slightly lit the tree line up. I swear I saw a man turn in a dog thing, like upright 4-limbed man thing, just turn into a creature on the ground like a dog. I started hitting my friend, repeatedly asking, "Did you see that?" Everything that happened so far, it has been maybe 5 minutes. It was moving very slow, like it was stalking us. It kept making strange noises we could hear barking. In front of us was a pond, and on the other side of it, in the middle, a huge clearly was there. Then it appeared out of the tree line. We both saw a shadow appear. Now, this part of the story I will always shake when I tell. I've been in the woods all my life. I have never heard anything like it. You can make weird eclectic noises on DJ equipment or whatever, but nothing can compare to what we heard. We saw this thing appear, and it let out the most highest pitched scream for about 3 seconds, as loud a tornado siren. My ears started ringing, and it started laughing again as we were grabbing the speaker. I noticed it starting running at us. Now there is a football field distance between us and whatever this thing was, and it crossed the pond in what it felt like a matter of a blink of an eye. We both went crazy and scrambled inside, locked the doors, of course. Now there wasn't a curtain on the window looking out onto the pond. So I sat there staring at that fucking window for what it felt like a year. All reality was 5-ish hours until sunlight, and I got TF out of there. I've told older men like my grandfather's this, that go to all over the world for elk hunting, etc., and they laugh at me. I will forever be in disbelief of this event. I will never forget it, and every time I think about, I can't get that thing scream out of my ears/head. Thank you for hearing my story. I think a lot about it, like, was this thing staring at me through the window and I couldn't see it? What if one of us tripped getting inside? So many unanswered questions I have that I will never know the truth. Story 9, Tyler, Texas Ghost Story. I heard an old story about a girl who died on 7 Hill Road but can't find anything online about it, so supposedly a girl was waiting on her prom date/boyfriend to pick her up to go to prom. She saw headlights up the road and ran out in the road thinking it was him to pick her up, but it was another car, and the car hit her and accidentally killed her, so now she haunts the road and chases cars and all of a sudden will appear in front of your car so you can run her over, but only on the 1980s. Don't know when she supposedly died or anything. If you have any information about this story or ever heard it, please tell me. Story 10. Objects moving alone in a room, still no answers. I am not a native English speaker, so I'm sorry for my bad English. This happened in 2013. I was 4 years old. It was 9 p.m. and I was in the living room with my mother watching TV and my dad was at work. Because of the hour, my mom put me to bed and went back to the living room to watch the TV. In my chamber, there was a shelf about 2 meters high with objects on it. Small toys, small cardboard animal figures, small decorative houses. I fell asleep, but like an hour later I got woke up by some things heavy on me. Through the light of my alarm clock, I saw the toys and animal figures and houses that were on the shelf hours earlier. They were on me. Scared. I screamed and my mother came. She was also as scared as me to see that the objects came on my bed. How did they move? The window was closed, so no wind. The shelf was 2 meters high and I was like 1 meter 20 tall, so I couldn't take these. My mother was watching the TV downstairs. The cat was outside. Maybe could have played with the object and laid these on me or anything else. Today, I still have no answers about what happened. Moreover, when I was little, I was scared of being alone upstairs. I always felt watched, and because of trees surrounding my house and windows, the second floor was always dark and cold. If anybody could help figure out how these objects could lay on me all alone. Story 11. I heard someone breathing inside the tunnel, but I was alone. This happened last month and I still can't get it out of my head. I don't know if anyone else has ever experienced something like this, but I need to share it. I live near an old railway line that's been out of use for years. There's an abandoned stone tunnel that cuts through the hill. When we were teenagers, we used to mess around there for fun, but now it's just covered in graffiti and trash. I never really felt scared of it until that night. I decided to take the shortcut home through the tunnel. I turned on my phone flashlight and started walking. My footsteps echoed all around me, which was normal. About 30 meters in, I heard something else. Breathing. It wasn't an echo. It was slow, steady breathing that didn't match mine. I froze. The tunnel went dead silent, except for my heartbeat hammering in my ears. After a few seconds, I heard it again, closer this time, like someone inhaling slowly right behind me. I spun around with the light. Nothing. The tunnel was empty. The strange thing was, the sound didn't seem to come from a single spot. It felt like the whole air around me was breathing. I started walking faster, almost running. I was nearly at the exit when I heard something that still makes my skin crawl. A voice, low and right next to my ear, whispering something I couldn't understand. It wasn't an echo. It wasn't in my head. It was real, right there. I bolted out of the tunnel and didn't look back. Since that night, I've been taking the longer route home just to avoid it. Story 12. An extra shadow I saw at my uncle's house. I'm not sure if this counts as a real ghost encounter, but it's something that has stayed in my mind ever since it happened. A few years ago, I went with my parents to visit my uncle's house. It was already night when we arrived. My parents went straight inside while I stayed in the car for a moment because I had to make a phone call. From where I was parked, I could see one of the windows, dimly lit from the inside, and the curtains made it so that I could only make out people's silhouettes moving around. At first, I noticed my parents and my uncle, just as expected. But then I realized there was one more shadow. It didn't move. It just stood there among the others. For a second, I thought maybe my uncle had gotten some kind of statue or tall decoration, so I tried not to think much of it and focused on finishing my call. When I finally walked into the house, I greeted my uncle and looked immediately to the spot where I had seen the still figure. But there was nothing there. No statue, no decoration, no one else in the room. I never asked my uncle about it because I didn't want to sound crazy, but to this day I can't shake the feeling that I saw someone who wasn't supposed to be there. Story 13. The grinning head that boarded the train after 1 a.m. This is a story I heard just recently from a friend who lives in New York. It was so creepy when I imagined it that I'm writing it down exactly as I heard it. That night, it was the subway in the middle of the night, just before 2 a.m. The car was almost empty, and the only people on board were me and a middle-aged man sitting diagonally across from me, drinking from a brown paper bag. I thought, come on, don't drink on the train, but he wasn't making any noise and I couldn't smell it from where I was, so I figured it was fine and kept looking at my phone. That night, I was heading home after something nice had happened in my love life, so I was in a pretty good mood. It had been just the two of us, the drunk middle-aged man and me, the whole time. When the train stopped at a station, I noticed a man in a suit standing just outside the doors, right near where the middle-aged man was sitting. I didn't think much of it and went back to looking at my phone, until suddenly, in a mechanical voice, he said, "What are you looking at?" Startled, I looked up, and his smirking face was right in front of me, peering at my phone screen. What the hell? My heart jumped, and as I took a closer look at him, an even bigger shock hit me. The man in the suit didn't have a body. Or rather, it wasn't here. Not here. His body was still on the platform, while only his head had stretched into the car, like a rubber band being pulled, leaving the rest behind. I caught sight of the middle-aged man, frozen in place with his drink in hand. It was obvious he could see the man in the suit too. I didn't have the courage to look back at that face, so I just stared at the middle-aged man for a while. Then came the automated announcement. "Stand clear of the closing doors, please," followed by a short chime. The long-necked man in the suit didn't seem interested in coming all the way inside. Instead, he slowly slid his head back toward the body left on the platform, grinning in a strange, unsettling way. Tilde. Relieved, I thought I was safe, but just before his head had completely cleared the doorway, the doors shut. Why would the doors close now? I felt nothing but dread in that moment. Maybe he wasn't a ghost at all, but some kind of rubber man. Even with his stretched neck crushed in the doorway, the man in the suit kept smirking. The train started moving slowly, his trapped neck stretched like rubber, following along. Through the window, I saw his body, still standing stiffly, fade into the distance. He was shaking his head violently from side to side, letting out that bizarre laugh. There was a loud bang as his face hit the doors, but he still kept following, just his head. I was trembling, begging in my mind for it to stop, when finally, as if he'd reached the limit of his stretch, his head popped out through the gap in the doors. Pop! And vanished into the night. After that, the middle-aged man, now completely sober, got off with me at the next station, both of us still shaking, and somehow we ended up going for a drink together. He'd had that face whipping back and forth right in front of him. He must have been way more terrified than I was. I never exchanged contact information with him, but I wonder how he's doing now. Story 14, The Grim Reaper Lurking in the Hospital. I can see spirits. Don't a lot of people think someone who says that sounds shady? That's why I don't usually tell people things like this. But if you're someone who likes scary things, maybe I could tell you. Saying that, I'm going to write down a story a friend of mine who works as a nurse told me over drinks when we met again for the first time in a while. She said she had been able to sense the presence of spirits since she was a child. At some point, it became normal for her, and when she saw them, she started ignoring them in everyday life. If she did that, she said, they weren't much different from living people, and she didn't find them all that scary. This is a story of a time when even she felt a little chill. I'll write it in her voice, so feel free to read it just to pass the time. November 2011. That day, I happened to be on the night shift at the hospital. There was a patient who had undergone hip hemiarthroplasty surgery along with shoulder surgery, and I remember their kidney function worsening after the procedures. Their condition had become quite poor. They were on dobutamine and hooked up to a monitor, and in the event of a sudden change, they were technically DNR, meaning no resuscitation efforts would be made. While I was doing my rounds, I heard the gurgling sound of phlegm building up, so I put on disposable gloves to perform suctioning, and then, suddenly, I sensed something at the foot of the bed. Out of the corner of my eye, that something came into view. A light blue hospital gown. Pure white hair hanging down to the waist. I couldn't see the face, but in an instant I thought it was a woman. And I realized I had seen that figure before. It was the same one who had been watching from the doorway when I went to take that patient's vitals. On another day, during oral care, I saw her peeking in through the gap in the curtain, and this time, as you can guess, she was getting closer and closer. Entrance, right pointing arrow curtain, right pointing arrow foot of the bed. Even so, aside from the simple feeling of revulsion, she seemed no different from the spirits I usually saw. Or so I thought. When my night shift ended and I headed home, I was on the late shift the next day, so around noon I went up to the ward. The room right at the top of the stairs was the one where that critically ill patient was staying. From that room, a member of the cleaning staff came out carrying a mop and a cleaning cloth. "Hey," I greeted casually, and they replied, "They've been taken away. Good thing you're on the late shift." After a while, another patient in poor condition from heart failure was admitted. That patient was placed in a monitored room close to the nurse's station. That day I was on the late shift, so around 7:30 p.m., as I was positioning the patient to perform oral care, she was standing in the doorway again. The next day, I was on the day shift and was assigned to that patient. When I went to the room in the afternoon to adjust the IV drip rate, this time she was at the foot of the bed. 3 days later, that patient passed away. Things like this happened several times, and at our end-of-year holiday party, after I'd had some drinks, I told the story to my senior coworker. What my senior coworker told me, "I think it's the Grim Reaper. I've heard the same thing happened at another hospital in the same group as ours." Apparently, There were two people there who could see it, and when those two would busily start preparing for post-mortem care, the patient would die a few hours later. It's the kind of story you might hear anywhere, but what chilled me the most were the next words. They said there is always a sign before the Grim Reaper takes someone away. First, it stands in the doorway, and once it comes into the room, it'll be within a week. And when that happens, the ringing in your ears always gets severe. I get it too. Whenever I run into her, there's always a loud ringing in my ears. So loud it makes me dizzy. So is it only in hospitals within this group? Or is it the same in this hospital? Or is it everywhere? I don't know. But I was together with the Grim Reaper. The moment I thought that, a shiver ran up my spine and goosebumps rose. If I grow older and when the time comes for me to leave this world, will I see it? Will that Grim Reaper be right next to me? Story 15. My story is from a creepy abandoned farm and stables. These all happened, as the title suggests, at a creepy old farm in my hometown. This location was strange as it consisted of a main house, a smaller cottage to the side of it, a barn, some small stables, and a brick building behind them. We could only assume was a workshop of some sorts, but the strange thing was it's built on our town's coastline. Back on track, this place was frequented by me and some friends in our teen years. It's since been knocked down, but we had some shared encounters in there. I would like to share and see if anyone had anything similar. It's important to note this place, from what I believe had some sort of history. There was another building that was some sort of inn connected a few years back, which to my knowledge was the scene of some sort of murder or death. As for the other buildings, I am sure they saw death too, being that they were pretty old, 1800s at the very least. The first we were in the barn building. Now I should note the coastline was pretty popular, so people would often walk past. However, of all THS times we were there prior, we never heard a voice loud enough to be heard whilst in the barn. As you can imagine, we're exploring and hear a sound from the back corner. What's weird is, my ears only heard a noise, but my brain immediately registered it as a girl's voice. I have no idea what was said, but it's as if I knew on instinct what it was. What's extra strange is my other friend who had headphones on also heard it. We both snapped around to look at the exact same spot. However, the last friend there stood with us who didn't have any headphones or anything didn't hear it. So that's one of the reasons I don't believe it was a person walking past. The fact two of us both registered and looked at the source of the noise, whilst the third had no clue what we were talking about. The next incident is the creepiest. Important to note, one of the buildings caught fire hours after we left that day. We were exploring and hanging out as usual, and decided to go into the main house. The only way in was a ladder up to the top floor window. Stupid, I know, but we were like 15, 16 once everyone was inside, although we'd have no problems previously with going downstairs. On this day, not a single one of us wanted to. We stood in the doorway looking at the stairs and all, for some reason, collectively agreed. Something feels off. It's like the energy itself shifted. From playful exploring to the most dreadful something's wrong I think I've ever felt, and so all collectively noped out of there and went to the beach instead. The building we got that feeling in wasn't even the one that caught fire, and I don't believe there could have been someone down there since we had already been there for at least 2 hours at this point, and with a single entrance to that building, we would have heard them. My question is, what on earth was that feeling? Why could only me and my other friend hear the girl's voice? And something I've thought recently is, was that strange dread feeling something trying to warn us to stay away to avoid the fire? The place has long since been knocked down now, but these events have always stuck with me. Story 16. My friend's creepy sister who kept saying die. I met up with my longtime friend Mark, a pseudonym, for the first time in a while, and we went out for some drinks. That night, he got drunk and told me a story, which I'll share here. Just so you don't get the wrong idea, this story is about what Mark and his buddy Chris, a pseudonym, talked about while they were out drinking. From here on, I'll write it in my friend Mark's own voice. It's not really advice, just something I wanted to talk about. What do you think? And that's how my friend Mark started telling his story. I've got this friend named Chris. A little while ago, I went out drinking with him. Chris had a younger sister. His sister was kind of different. How can I say this? She gave me the impression of being a mysterious kind of person. I'd run into her a few times at Chris's place, though we hardly ever spoke. And then, about a year ago, that sister killed herself. I didn't go to the funeral, but I heard about her death from Chris. Chris lowered his voice and began to tell me this. My sister, the people she told to die. They actually did, one after another. Before that, no matter how angry she got, She never used words like die, but about a year before she died, every now and then she'd mutter things like, die, you should just die, you're going to die. One day, he had his sister tag along when he went to meet some acquaintances. On the way back, she muttered in a tiny voice, I hate him, he should just die. Chris was surprised since it was so unlike her, but he figured it was just a slip, an offhand mutter, and ignored it. Well, it's not like I particularly like that guy either, Chris added with a smile. But about 2 weeks later, that acquaintance died. And after that, there were a few other times she said things like die as well. Then, with the drinks flowing and Chris getting tipsy, he said something else. Remember when everyone got together at my house for that party, Mark? Do you remember that? Huh? When was that? I racked my brain. Then it came back to me. Before his sister died, there had been a home party at Chris's place with maybe 20 people, including me. And yes, his sister had been there too. Chris's face was a little flushed from the alcohol as he went on. That night he said he'd overheard his sister whisper, everyone should just die. And sometime after that, Chris's sister killed herself. Thinking back on it later, I realized something. At that home party, there were plenty of people I was meeting for the first time. As far as I know, some of it from what others told me, within a year, 5 of those 20 people had died. No, if you count Chris's sister, that makes 6. Even among my own acquaintances, 2 of them are dead. They were still fairly young, too. When you think about it, doesn't that seem like way too many to just be coincidence? My friend Mark hunched his shoulders as he said this. Then he added, don't you think that's an abnormal number? Hearing all this from Chris really scared the hell out of me. And with his voice trembling a little, he finished with this. Everyone, that includes me too, doesn't it? I remember feeling a chill run through me and instantly sobering up as I listened to Mark's story. As for me, I still believe it was nothing more than coincidence. Story 17. Spooky story that happened to me. When I was with my ex-GF, I would regularly stay with her at her parents' house. After her parents had gotten a divorce, her mom moved out. As her dad was cleaning out some stuff she had left behind, he found a pot cookie. I, being a well-versed pothead, was no stranger to an edible. However, my ex-GF at the time didn't really smoke or partake. One night, while her and I were laying in bed watching Toy Story, her dad came into the room and offered us the cookie. Her and I both looked at each other and kinda shrugged our shoulders. It was a real EHH why the hell not kind of moment. After he gives us this cookie, he leaves to go hang out with his new GF or whatever. So we're home alone. Anyways, we eat this cookie, which is only said to be 25 milligrams total. Her and I split it evenly. We're watching Toy Story for a little while until she starts to act very strange. I turn off the movie to try and comfort her, but she is going through multiple different episodes of behavior. One minute she's freaking out, shoving me away from her, saying not to touch her or look at her. The next minute she's telling me how much she loves me and she's glad I'm there for her. The next minute she's laughing hysterically. This went on for hours. I mean, into the late night hours of dawn. It was like someone was switching the channels of her brain every few minutes. I was beginning to become a little worried. We ended up moving to the bathroom floor at some point, where I was attempting to comfort her until she finally became exhausted. Finally, it's probably 3 or 4 a.m., and I got her into bed. We're in the bed, she's coming back to her normal self a bit, but she keeps asking me to stop shaking the bed. I assured her that I wasn't shaking the bed, and that the bed wasn't shaking either. This is where it gets spooky. She finally falls asleep, and when she does, the end of the bed starts to violently shake, like Exorcist movie shaking. Every hair on my body is standing up at this point, and my ex-GF is asleep. I begin to pray to God in my head that whatever is attacking leaves. This kept going on for a while. Then I began to notice music was playing in my head. Music I had never heard before, but was seemingly creating. I'm a musician after all, so it wasn't uncommon, but looking back now, I believe something was giving me this music. The bed finally stopped shaking, and I was able to fall asleep as the sun was beginning to shine outside. We wake up, and I insist we go out for breakfast. We sit down at the restaurant and I say we gotta talk about last night. She was terrorfied and did not want to speak about it. I begged her and told her I experienced something paranormal. She told me she saw a shadow figure made of clay that was attached to my back, and that every time I would attempt to comfort her or reach towards her, that she could only see its tentacles reaching towards her. I'm genuinely curious if anybody has had any experience like this. I know drugs can be a gateway to the spirit realm, and I have had other paranormal experiences, but this one too, this day is my most abnormal experience. Story 18. Hey, everyone, I have a story to tell that bothers me daily since childhood, and I can't get it off my mind. I'm 17, almost 18 next month, and I've had many experiences with the supernatural, and as a child, I often would stay awake all night hearing noises around me. Let me start off. I grew up in London, UK, but originally I am from Punjab, India, and I was also born there but came to the UK when I was 3, so I basically grew up here. In my culture, there is a lot of people who tend to do black magic, and they do it around the Indian festival of Diwali, not to ward off dark spirits, but to bring them. Often, they will leave candles to burn in the middle of the street, and it is believed that anyone who is passing by will have all the sins of the person who placed the candle put onto them, meaning the other person has the passerby sacrifice for their pleasure. The moment I tiptoed out of the room where me and my grandma were sleeping, I was surprised to see my grandma standing in the corner of where an old chair lay, and I was bewildered since I swore I just saw her in a deep sleep in the room, so I decided to peer back in the room and my grandma was still fast asleep. My mind began to race and I felt like I was going to faint. When I looked back to the corridor, my grandma was still standing near the fridge, smiling. I decided to remain quiet since I didn't want anyone to wake up and get angry at me for still being awake, so I decided to walk towards the figure. The figure, which seemed to look like my grandma, started to speak and say, "You want to come and play with the dolls while standing on the balcony?" I was so surprised that my grandma was saying that since she was always too tired or busy to play with me, so I agreed. We walked to the balcony where we could view the rest of the town. It was pitch dark and all the street vendors had long gone home. I looked down the street and saw the house next to us. There had been an old couple who lived there but had died when I was around 2 and it was abandoned. But what caught my eye was that my grandma was standing in their garden, waving and screaming at me to jump from the balcony, and she promised. I began to panic and I was about to jump off when I remembered that this was not my grandma and I was probably just dreaming, so I decided to walk back down. As I was walking back into the house, I felt something grab the back of my collar. I turned around and it was my grandma, but this time it didn't sound like her. She was screaming at me for not doing as she said and that I was going to be punished. I used my quick instincts and what I'd learned from horror movies that I had watched, which were all 18 plus, and I decided to run back into the house and wake up my real grandma. Obviously, when I got back in, I could still feel the presence of the entity, but my grandma was just not waking up and was in such a deep sleep. I decided to lay back in bed. Despite all that had happened, I was just about to close my eyes and doze off when I saw something standing near the cabinet. With its limbs contorted and tongue out, it had long hair and a blue face. I tried not to scream. It looked exactly like what I perceived to be a Chudale, an Indian female ghost. I don't know what happened after that, but I somehow just fell asleep, and I haven't told anyone I know about this since that day because I know no one would believe me. So I think my mom has a poltergeist or something. So I heard poltergeists maybe are emotional energy, which is the only way I can actually classify what my mom and my family are dealing with. So it only started happening after my mom and old stepdad got a divorce. We moved from our old house because of the weird noises and paranormal activity, but it followed us to our new house. I'm pretty sure we've heard footsteps going up and down the stairs, and we've heard something banging on my sister's bedroom door. I felt like someone pushed me before, but there was no one there. Just last night I heard tapping noises. It's also important to note that most of the paranormal Story 20. A ghost living in my teacher's house. Could it be my sister? A female friend once told me this story. Here, I'll write it down just as I heard it from her. It happened back when I was still in middle school, at a time when I didn't have any sensitivity to the supernatural and couldn't see such things myself. I was in the school band, and during a break in practice, I was chatting with our young advisor. At the time, I had never seen a ghost myself, but I was fascinated by anything paranormal or occult, and I loved hearing about other people's experiences. So that day, as casually as ever, I asked my teacher, let's just call her Ms. Brown here, "Have you ever had a ghostly experience, Ms. Brown?" It turned out my teacher was what you'd call sensitive, or someone who could see such things. After thinking for a moment, she began to tell me a story. Apparently, for the past 6 years, there had been a ghost in her house. The first time she saw it, she didn't think it was all that scary, so she didn't pay much attention. Since she could often see such things, her reaction was more like, "Oh, there's one." The ghost was a girl about my age, a middle schooler, wearing a dress, standing at the far end of the hallway with her head down. That same day, she saw her again, this time sitting on the living room sofa, and later on the staircase landing, staring intently at her. Since she saw her repeatedly, she began to wonder if the ghost might be attached to the house, and she got scared. She decided to tell her mother what the girl looked like. Then her mother looked a little startled and said, "That sounds like it could be the architect's daughter. the one who designed this house. She died in an accident while it was being built. Not long before she passed away, the architect brought his daughter here to see it. He probably wanted to show her, "This is the house your father designed." I even remember seeing her sitting on the stairs, looking all around the place with so much curiosity. After that, my teacher would sometimes see the girl's ghost again. Her mother wanted to tell the architect about it, but she said she hadn't been able to get in touch with him. Hearing this, my heart nearly stopped. It wasn't because I was scared, it was pure intuition. I thought that girl might be my sister, who had died in a car accident 6 years ago. And I thought the architect they couldn't reach might have been my father, who had taken his own life 5 years ago. What shocked me most was that my sister wasn't at peace, that she hadn't crossed over. I felt I had to go and bring her home before it was too late. When I told my teacher everything, she was very surprised. The next day, I was to go to her house. When I told my mother, she said she wanted to come with me, but she had an important job she couldn't miss. She entrusted everything to me and saw me off. When I arrived, my teacher greeted me with a smile and led me into the living room, where she often saw my sister's spirit. I felt bad for thinking it, but the room was dim, with little sunlight coming in. I thought, has my sister been here all this time, alone in a place like this? Anger welled up inside me at myself for never realizing it before. After a while, my teacher left me alone. I desperately called out to my sister. "I'm sorry for leaving you alone all this time. I'm sorry I didn't notice. I've come to get you. You don't have to be alone anymore. Come on, let's go home. Mom's waiting for us. Let's go back together." Before long, I was crying. I wondered what my sister thought of me. How could I have left such a kind sister alone for so long? After I had been crying for some time, I felt someone gently tap my shoulder. When I turned around, there stood a girl I had never seen before, her face pale, drained of life, disturbingly eerie. The girl twisted her mouth into a warped smile and muttered, "Hey, will you take me with you?" That wasn't my sister. The instant I realized it, I blacked out. When I came to, I was lying on the sofa. I thanked my teacher and went straight home. I only told my mother I didn't see anything and kept the rest to myself. More than the fact that the eerie girl I don't know is still behind me, what worries me is only whether my real sister is at peace. Hearing this story sent shivers down my spine. I heard that since then, she has become able to see spirits. However, she hasn't encountered her sister's ghost. This makes me believe that her sister is already resting peacefully in heaven. Story 21. Keep eyes closed. Ever since I was young, unexplainable, almost weird things have happened. However, nothing quite as odd and even chilly, I would add, as that one night. There's always been this sensation of otherworldly pulling I've always felt. Maybe because I'd sit around watching scary movies way past my bedtime as a kid. In the dark. Alone. I grew up with religious beliefs, so I guess I'm not quite afraid of the darkness. But maybe about what darkness carries. On a warm, slightly cool, breezy day, I slumped on my bed, knowing that's all I would be doing all day. Evening hit, and I was still laying down watching Dexter's Laboratory on Cartoon Network. Not sure when I doze off to sleep, but I eventually did. I'm usually a very light sleeper. I woke up the following morning to find something strange. My bedsheet cover was laying on the floor exactly the way I had it on me, stretched down, not one wrinkle in sight. I would have been a lot more rational of the idea of it falling due to movements done by me, even though I've never been a crazy sleeper. However, not only was my blanket nicely stretched on the floor, but it was on the opposite side of my bed, just right where I lay my head. Of course, I interrogated my family, but nobody was awake when it happened, nor could anyone explain why my blanket was on the opposite side of my bed. About 2 or 3 days passed, I had put the incident past me. This night I still have not been able to forget, and I don't think I ever will. The night hit almost instantly. It felt like a short day. Everyone in my bedroom was sound asleep. I was too, or so I thought. I can't tell what time this happened because I didn't even get a chance for anything else. There was a mirror on the wall next to the bathroom in our room. That night my eyes suddenly opened out of nowhere when I had completely been asleep. There, right across my bed in almost slow motion, at first a large black shadow moved towards the mirror. Then, as if it knew I was watching, it instantly disappeared inside the mirror. I wanted to get up and check if I had seen what I saw correctly. However, something, or someone, made my eyes feel super heavy to the point they closed, and I went into a deep sleep. I woke up late the following morning and with a sensation that what I felt like it was a dream really wasn't. Story 22. Sorcerer uses black magic to destroy his neighbor, and it actually works. A sorcerer living nearby wanted to buy a piece of land close to his home, but due to financial problems, he couldn't. Instead, another man bought it, built a house there, and moved in with his wife and young son. After they moved in, things quickly went bad. The man lost his job, putting heavy pressure on the family. Their health started to decline, his wife felt weak and sick, and even their son had trouble sleeping. The house no longer felt like a happy place. The man himself grew weaker every day, both physically and mentally, and struggled to hold the family together. On the advice of a relative, he went to a priest in Katamutam for help. The priest told him to dig in the kitchen and remove strange objects buried there. He did exactly that. On the same day, the sorcerer died. After that, life started to get better for the family. Story 23. Has anyone experienced something like this near the water? 3 nights ago, I went through something that's hard to explain, and I want to share it both to see if anyone's had a similar experience and as a warning for people who drink or are in vulnerable states near water. I was out drinking with friends, but eventually left and went to my boyfriend's place. I told him to stay home and not to follow me. For some reason, I felt drawn to the beach. On the walk down the hill, I got this horrible gut feeling, like I already knew something bad was about to happen, and I cried before I even reached the water. When I got there, my boyfriend called me, and while we were on the phone, I heard his voice coming from far out in the water. He sounded distressed, calling out to me. I told him I could hear him and that I was going in to get him. Then the call cut off completely. My phone wasn't low on battery. Without hesitation, I went into the water with all my clothes and shoes still on. The moment I stepped in, I didn't feel cold at all, only warmth, like walking into a hot tub. I kept calling for him, but his voice kept getting further away. I passed the first drop off and was deep enough that the water was above my waist. My shoes felt incredibly heavy, and I moved so slowly. I reached out in the water trying to find him, but then his voice stopped completely. All I could hear were the calm waves. The moonlight made the black water look still and eerie. That's when panic hit. I realized how deep I was and started crying and yelling, "I don't want to die this way." It felt like something heavy was on me, like I was being watched from behind in the water. As I walked toward shore, it felt like it was taking forever, like I was getting farther instead of closer. And I swear I felt a light push on my stomach as if trying to push me back in. When I finally got to the shore, I sat down with my legs still in the water. The fear was gone, replaced with calm. My boyfriend called again and I could still hear his voice in the water, even though he was actually home. I told him if he wasn't home, I'd go back in to find him. The rest of the night felt strange. I told him everything, but it felt almost like a hallucination, like I wasn't really there until I hugged him. The next day, I still felt watched, even inside, but without fear. In my culture, there are stories about spirits in the water that can call to you in familiar voices. They wait until you're vulnerable. And I was drunk, emotional, and alone. I believe something tried to lure me in that night. I walked away, but I know it's not gone. Please, if you ever feel pulled toward water when you're in a vulnerable state, especially if you hear a familiar voice, don't go. Story 24. My ghost experience when I was young. When I was roughly around the age of 9-11, I can remember vividly this ghost experience. I was at home because I was ill with tonsillitis. I suffered with it bad when I was young. I stayed home from school and was with my mom most of the day, playing FIFA and being led next to her so I could feel better. My dad was at work and my brother, who is 2 years younger than me, was at school and was finishing soon, so my mom, as she always does, drives to the bus stop to wait for him. I was left home alone. I was quite happy because I could turn the TV volume a lot louder as to not bother my mom. My 2 cats were in the living room sleeping. I just started a match on FIFA and I started to hear thumping. I turned the TV down to mute and paused my game. The thumping and banging was getting louder and I could hear it was in my room upstairs. I have a really thin floor so you could hear everything. Then I heard chains and grunting. I watched a lot of ghost stuff with my mom and I thought that this could be explained, but before I could even think of an explanation, the thumbing, which I believe was footsteps, was walking down the stairs with the chain sounds and the deep male grunting. Each step that was being taken, a grunt and chain sound would happen. I heard it get to the bottom of the stairs and stopped. My cats, who were sleeping, were fully awake and staring at the door that enters to the living room. No hissing or growling, just ears perked and staring. I was too scared, so I went underneath the blanket that was on the sofa and I just waited for my mom to come home. I heard the chains since then. At my grandmother's place, just a brief rattling as if to taunt and entice me to come upstairs and see. Since then, I have firmly believed in ghosts. I'm just wondering if I'd ever hear those chains again. Story 25. The night I saw myself again. This happened years ago, back when I was still a student. And at that point in my life, my third eye was very active. I was used to seeing and sensing things. But this was different. I was on the living room floor working on homework with all my books and papers spread out around me. It was storming outside. Heavy rain, thunder rumbling in the distance. I was so focused on my work when suddenly I felt that chill. The one where every hair on your body stands up because you know someone is watching you. For some reason, my eyes went straight to the open doorway that led to the hallway and the restroom, and that's when I saw it. It was me, hiding halfway behind the door, just staring and smiling. Not a friendly smile, a creepy smile. It lasted only a split second, but my whole body froze before instinct took over and I bolted straight downstairs, heart racing. Even now, writing this, I have goosebumps just remembering it. At the time, I chalked it up to one of my scariest paranormal experiences, but now, after another strange experience realization I've had, see my previous post here, I'm starting to think, could it have actually been me? Like some bizarre time slip, doppelganger moment, or a version of me from another reality? The thought makes my skin crawl, but also, I can't stop wondering. Story 26. The president died on an eerie full moon night. This is a story I heard from a longtime friend. It's about a strange incident that happened to his mother, which I've organized and written as if he were telling it himself. So please have a read. This is a story my mother experienced. About 5 years ago, my mother worked for a company run by my father's business partner. The company's president had a terrible temper at times. Even simple requests like, please take a look at this document, would set him off, leading him to throw things or lash out at those around him. One day, after another bad day with the president, my mother came home and noticed it was a full moon. She soon realized that the president's mood worsened almost every time there was a full moon. It happened so often that my mother began to dread going to work whenever she saw a full moon. Then, one day, without any illness or accident, the president suddenly passed away. The cause was a sudden heart attack. It might have been from overwork. What made it even stranger was that, the day before he died, the president told his wife, "I'm going to DISA tomorrow." His wife thought it was just another one of his jokes and said, "Stop joking around." But later, feeling uneasy, she asked, "Why would you say something like that?" The president, confused, responded, "What? I never said that." That same day, something seemed to compel the president to write what looked like a suicide note. After that, my mother began to have strange dreams. In one dream, the president appeared in her pitch-black bedroom and said, "Why isn't my seat at the company anymore?" In the dream, my mother replied, "Because you passed away, sir." Not satisfied with that answer, the president opened his eyes wide and screamed, "I'm not dead, am I? I'm not dead." As my mother stood there, unsure of what to do, a skeletal figure suddenly emerged behind the president. The figure was nearly 6 feet 7 inches tall, wearing a hooded cloak and holding a scythe in its left hand. Without a word, the skeletal figure grabbed the president's head with its right hand and dragged him into the darkness. Even as he struggled, the president kept shouting, "I'm not dead, am I? I'm not dead." Then, slowly he vanished into the darkness, along with his screams. Later, my mother reflected and said, "That must have been the Grim Reaper." When my mother told this story to her colleagues, she found out something chilling. It wasn't just her. Her colleagues and even the president's wife had the same dream, and every dream the president was saying the same thing, "I'm not dead, am I? I'm not dead." And in every dream he was dragged away by the Grim Reaper, disappearing into the void. When I heard this story, it sent shivers down my spine. Even now, my mother sometimes dreams of the president. In every dream, the president says the same thing, "I'm not dead, am I? I'm not dead." It's like watching the same scene from a horror movie over and over again. And on the day the president died, it too was a full moon night. Story 27. My grandma's house was haunted. January 19th, 2003. I was at my grandma's house because this happened 3 days after she died, and in the will the house was given to me, so I moved in and all got the dogs to the house, and then that's where it got strange. The house had long, dark hallways. The dogs always used to look down the hallways. One day I was downstairs and I hear like 2 people having a conversation in the living room. But I was alone. The people were talking, but not actually talking about anything. It was just random words. They were whispering too, and I called my dad. He came and stayed with me that night. 3 years later, I now have a 2-year-old little boy, and he absolutely hated the house. He slept on the top floor, and one night I hear him crying, so I went up the stairs and went to his crib and looked in, and that's when I remember my girlfriend had him for the night, so I just thought I saw not having enough sleep, so I went to leave the room, and that's when I hear whispering in my ear. I ran downstairs, took the dogs in the car, and left the house. 5 days later, I went back to the house after staying with my mom, and the house looked off like, you know, when you come back from holiday and see your house empty like that, but it felt odd. Today, my girlfriend and her friends came to the house because her friends were into ghost stuff, and I wasn't there because it was a girls' night. And then 3 hours later, my girlfriend texted to that the house burned down because they lit candles on the bed, and the blanket was flammable, so it just burned the house down. The house was completely destroyed. Everything in there was gone except one old painting of a little boy crying my grandma had. Now it's 2025. I have done research, and apparently the painting is bad luck or something because every house the painting was in burned down, except the painting didn't get burned. So it's 2025 now. My son is 21 now, but he claims to remember the house, but he was just 2 years old, so I doubt it. But he moved into this old house, and he claims that he hears whispering. We still don't know much about that house, but we do know it was haunted. The spirits aren't done yet. Subscribe so you don't miss the next ghost story.